spending, I think, a lot of time drinking from the proverbial fire hose and reading lots of information and getting up to speed and asking good questions. And, I think really going to provide a lot of value to the lands program. I'm personally really looking forward to continuing working with Jody, and glad to have her on board. So those would be my opening comments. I don't know, Jody, if you want to share a few thoughts yourself.
No, I think that was good. You did a good job, Eric. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I know I've spent an extraordinary amount of time with some of you, and so I appreciate everything that you've given me, and I hope that you understand when I continue to ask more questions and come to you for more guidance on some things. This is a huge project for this region and for the state, and there's a lot of complexities kind of buried within some of the paperwork that I've been reading through. So I appreciate all the time, and I look forward to getting to know of you more on a personal basis. So.
Well, welcome, Jody. We're happy to have you here. Maybe for the benefit of all the members, you could just share your background a little bit, especially we've got a lot of Minnesota folks on the line here that maybe aren't aware of your expertise. But if you do that, I'd appreciate it.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner. So I currently still serve as the land commissioner for the state of North Dakota. So in that role, I manage 706,000 surface acres, about 2.6 million mineral acres. We have about $7 billion in investments. And I've been in that role for a little over 4 years now, and I'll continue in that role while they look to fill my position. So just kind of through that transition. Growing up, I grew up on dairy farms, and my husband and I have had a lot of different agricultural background, whether it is a dairy farm or a greenhouse or landscape yard. So very familiar with land management and kind of what it takes to manage that land, but also working through some complex issues is really what I enjoy doing. And so hopefully the knowledge that I've gained over the past, 20 so years will help me fulfill the needs that you guys have. But again, probably the most relative and recent expertise that I have and can bring to the table is just working through the state. Eric and I have been talking. I know some of our team members were in a meeting yesterday about geomorphology, and I don't know if I can say fortunately or unfortunately, I've been involved in some of those conversations in the past, and I'm familiar, again, some of the issues that you guys have been contending with for the past couple of years. And again, hopefully my experience can bring you guys some value. So.
Well, great. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for Jody? Again, welcome. We look forward to working with you. Okay, let's move on to item number 5. Eric, you want to talk about where we're at with property acquisitions?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Commissioner. So in your packet, I think you're all probably familiar with this, but I'll maybe just walk through a few things. This is our monthly status report. Again, the first page is more of just an index of all the different components of the project. The second page, I'll zoom in here a little bit so we can see, but this is an area where typically try to spend just a little bit of time focusing on a few high points, overall status map. Of course, we've been essentially done with the channel for quite some time now. The red properties are properties that are working their way through the different court cases, eminent domain situations. And so we do have a number of trials that are scheduled to start early next year and basically continue throughout next year. So that's one of the things we've been talking with Jody a little bit about, is just getting familiar with, why did we have to go to court and where are we at with the sort of value debates on those parcels. And that will continue as we move forward. Otherwise, you can see, the southern embankment, we continue to get design information from the Corps on a reach by reach basis. We have completed the acquisitions, again, several of them through an eminent domain process, but completed the acquisitions for the Reach 1, the western tieback. We've completed the acquisitions for the inlet structure that was several years ago, the wild rice structure, and just recently, this past week, completed the acquisitions for the Red River control structure. So with that, continuing to make progress, actively working on Southern Embankment Reach 2A, which is a portion of the Camel Hump area, as well as the Drain 27 wetland project. And then, the upstream mitigation area, which I can touch on in a bit more detail later. From a number standpoint, you can see if you include the green means acquired, plus those that are in eminent domain. We're over 700 parcels now. So continuing to make progress in that regard. At the status or at the time when this report was produced, we have a number of rural residential properties that are in negotiations. We have a small handful of purchase agreements signed. You might notice a few of those for Drayton. So we're working with the city of Drayton to acquire the property rights necessary for the Drayton project, and that's progressing pretty well. So I give you an overall summary there. The next page is the environmental monitoring easements. And again, a whole bunch of these had been acquired, and we're continuing to try to work with property owners to acquire the outstanding environmental monitoring easements. That's something that will probably linger on for some time as it's integrated with the adaptive management plan and some of the geomorphology that Jody just mentioned earlier. The next handful of pages drill into each segment of the project in more detail. I won't spend much time on those. You can see, again, we're making progress. Happy to discuss any of these in more detail. On the flowage easement side, I guess maybe just to point out, the Crown appraisal team has been working on the flowage easement valuations for much of this year. They are scheduled to be done with their valuations by the end of the year. And we've been spending a bit of time the last several weeks getting prepared to review those appraisal reports and put forward a summary of the results of that appraisal to the board, the joint board and the MCCJPA board for reviewing the appraisal information, getting offers out to property owners, and really starting in earnest the process of trying to acquire those easements starting in early 2022. So with that, I guess I'll pause, see if there's comments or questions.
Questions from anyone? So, Eric, when Crown finishes that work, what's the timeline?
So they're supposed to be done with their appraisal reports by the end of the year. Once they're done with their appraisal reports, there's roughly, I guess I've been saying 500. That's not the exact number, but it gives you a flavor of the amount of parcels. So they'll submit their appraisal reports. Each one of those appraisal reports will end up being probably 3 to 4 pages. So fairly abbreviated, but keep in mind there's a several 100-page background document that was produced a couple of years ago that is being referred to in those 3 to 4 page summary reports. So each summary report will need to be reviewed by our review appraiser. And obviously it's just a mass of information. And so we're working on some tools to help present a summary of that information, probably some maps to sort of showcase the variations and how the appraisal, I guess I'm anticipating the appraisal results will make sense, if you look at them from a mass standpoint. So we'll put some maps together that might be able to show that information. That has to be presented and approved by the acquiring agencies. So again, the Cass County Joint Board on the North Dakota side and the Moorhead-Clay County JPA on the Minnesota side. We're looking forward to bringing that information at the February meetings next year. And then once that information is approved, we'll be sending offer packets out to the property owners, hopefully in late February, and then starting the process of visiting with property owners about their appraised information, planning to have some informational meetings or open houses with property owners where they can come in and meet with land agents, meet with other experts to learn more about it. So quite a bit of activity happening in that right now, and I guess certainly happy to talk more details if you're interested.
So you mentioned the background appraisal that was done 2 or 3 years ago now. Will that need to be updated as well, or is that more or less theory type?
Yeah, so good question. So the first phase study for phase 1 study was done in 2018, and that was really a more of a desktop exercise, trying to see is there market data that would show a value difference between lands that flood and lands that don't flood. And they were able to find good data both in North Dakota, Minnesota, as well as down in Missouri. And they really boiled it down to a percentage basis. And so it doesn't really matter whether land is worth 100 or 10,000, as long as you're using a percentage, those percentages would still sort of stand the test of time. We did have them update that study in 2020. And so they were able to gather a few additional sales in that time frame. And so I think we've got a pretty good baseline from the 2018 study updated in 2020 that they can use and lean on that and apply those findings to the exact parcels that are impacted by the project.
And I'm betting if you did a 2021, there'd be even a less of a difference.
Yeah, maybe, perhaps, yeah.
I mean, the market's pretty hot, so.
Right.
Okay, anybody else have any other questions? Make sure I can see everybody here. And I lost it. All right. Then let's move on to item 6, the Cass County Joint Board update. I don't know, is somebody here from the Joint Board? I don't think Roger was.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it. Maybe just a couple things from a joint board standpoint. Obviously, lots of activity happening with detailed acquisitions. The joint board does meet every 2 weeks, although in November and December, they only meet once a month. And so we have a meeting with the joint board tomorrow morning. They've been having long, well thought out discussions about offers and counter offers. We're planning to have an executive session with the board tomorrow to review some counter offers that have come back from property owners, as well as review. And some of those are related to parcels that are through an eminent domain case right now. And so, again, lots of activity, lots of good debate going on. At the last joint board meeting 3 weeks ago, the board was able to give some good direction to our land agents about how to respond to counter offers. The land agents have done a nice job responding to that, and we're looking forward to presenting that information to the board tomorrow. So continue to be pretty active. The other thing I might just mention is, as we're getting close to the end of the year, our farmland manager, Pfeiffer's, is visiting with our tenants and working on farmland lease renewals. That's happening on both sides of the river. And so there's some contracting actions to make sure Pfeiffer's is under contract to continue doing that work on our behalf.
Great, thank you. I guess I would just add also that we've had the last 2 Cass County Commission meetings, we've had multiple cases of quick take eminent domain that Eric has done a great job of presenting. And I know not Monday, but 2 weeks before that, we had a packed house. We had a lot of cases to go through, and those are always kind of tough. But kudos to all of you for the great job you do, and hopefully we can have fewer and fewer of those as we move forward, because they're not fun for anyone. Any questions? Then we'll move on to the Minnesota update. And Commissioner Monjo, do you have that?
Yeah, I can pitch it. I was kind of waiting for Campbell to tune in, but I think Eric can help save me when I crash miserably. But that was the second meeting that we'd had in October. Talked obviously about the Red River control structure negotiations that are ongoing and the acquisition status report, as you all are aware of. We did have one negotiation summary on a property that we talked about, and reviewed and took action on 2 different replacement housing differential cases, and then took action on the ProSource task order. There was an amendment to that. Tomorrow we actually will meet for that. I know one big thing that maybe came up, and I don't know if you've talked about this more internally, is that there was a proposal for a solar garden that would be on the north side of the dam on the Minnesota, not the dam, but the embankment on the Minnesota side. And it was our understanding that that would not impede at all with the embankment. So that was approved preliminarily. And I think Eric, from what I'm hearing, that's appreciated. There wasn't any issues from the Diversion Authority. So that will go forward on that. And then one big thing that I think just seems to be coming to a head is that we're talking about organic farmland values. And, I question a little bit the thought that there really isn't much of a value difference between organic farmland and regular farmland. There just seems to be so much in terms of years that go into making sure those are certified. We'll have that conversation tomorrow, but not sure if that affects the North Dakota side as much as it does on the Minnesota side, but we'll certainly work through that. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you did a nice job, Jenny. Maybe just to follow up on a couple of those points on the solar garden. Yeah, we were able to work with Matt Jacobson at Clay County about the proposed location of the solar garden, and based on the preliminary design of the embankment, it appears that there's not an impact, and so I think the decision was made that we didn't need to bother commenting in that regard. So I think that's good news. In terms of the organic farmland, yeah, we'll have a good discussion. I know John Albrecht is our review appraiser, and he's circled back with the actual appraiser to help address your questions, Commissioner Mojo, about value differences. Our appraiser, just for disclosure, our appraiser has very clearly stated that they feel organic farming is a management decision, and just because you choose to farm your land organically does not increase or decrease the value of the land. They feel like it was a management decision. So that's an interesting, Don, I think when we first discovered that several years ago, when we first bought that organic land over by Comstock, we were a little bit surprised by that, but the appraiser has echoed that same feeling now. And so I think we'll have some good discussion at the board meeting tomorrow and see where that takes us.
I think maybe would offer one more comment and or suggestion. The discussion that went around the solar garden afterwards is we were questioning if the organization that puts up the solar panels needs to have any sort of additional coverage or liability because it's so close to the embankment. And I think it's more of just an afterthought on our part, because we're not setting up the investment. But I think that maybe we should find an answer on that if that becomes a case going forward.
Sure. It sounds like it's above my pay grade.
Well, I have a first grader that just walked in the room, so I'm just glad I got done with that report before that.
Good timing. Okay, thanks, Jenny. The next item is in your packet. It's the committee update for the DA board. I think we've covered everything except, Eric, maybe you want to touch a little bit on the replacement housing relocation benefits and then where we're at with crop insurance.
Yeah, sure.
Or anything else.
Yeah, sure. So on the flowage easements, again, we maybe spent a little bit of time talking about that. Just we've had some internal discussions about the process we want to use for getting offers out the door and start. People are anxious to know what's the flowage easement worth. I know all of you are anxious. We're anxious, and so looking forward to get those appraisals back and then start visiting with property owners early next year. We have several years to acquire those easements, but nonetheless, it's going to be a pretty big effort. Again, if we're talking in the 500 to 600 parcel range, that's just a lot of work going on. So spend time on strategies for that. On the replacement housing and relocation benefits, so as hopefully the group's aware, we have about 70 rural residential property owners that need to be bought out and provided relocation benefits for the project. And we've been making some progress on that. We've acquired a handful of them already, but there's a bunch more to still come. And as you maybe have heard, the cost of housing is, seems to be crazy high and always going up. And so the people who are displaced are being provided relocation benefits, but that's a challenge that we continue to work through. And so I guess Jody and I have been sort of tackling that project, or starting to tackle that a little bit more. Just what can we do from a project standpoint to make sure that our acquisitions are going as smoothly as we can. We certainly don't want to have 70 eminent domain cases for residential properties, for example. And so that's something we're spending, is kind of a focus area that we're spending some time on. One of the challenges, in addition to the cost side, is there's not very many rural building sites available for people to build on, even if they wanted to. And so it's, just a challenge that's representative of the market out there. So I guess happy to go into more detail there, but hopefully it gives you a flavor of the challenge we're focusing on. And then the crop insurance piece, as the group is probably aware, we've committed through the settlement agreement with Rich and Wilkin JPA to provide some supplemental crop insurance programs as additional mitigation for the risks of flooding farmland or growing crops in particular. And so, the framework for what we need to provide is established via the settlement agreement. We've had a consultant called Watts and Associates working on the project for a number of years. They've been engaged on helping analyze what that program would look like, what it would cost for us to provide that additional insurance. And we've established a small group, I guess we're calling a focus group, to help meet with us and further develop that program. So Roger Olson's been engaged in this as kind of our resident farmer on the board. And we've got a focus group meeting set up later this month with a handful of the area farmers, as well as our crop insurance expert, Roger, the Diversion Authority staff as well. So making progress on that. I guess just to point out, the framework of that insurance program can be established, but the actual policy is still several years away from being developed because, frankly, the underwriters have no interest in meeting with us if we don't need to offer the insurance for 5 or 6 more years, just because it's not needed until the project is operational. So in the meantime, we have to, put some more details together, but recognize we won't actually have the detailed policy for several years yet.
So Eric, I'd like to back up a little bit to the replacement housing. You've mentioned that you're assisting landowners or property owners to search for that. Or am I misunderstanding that? And if so, how, in what way are you assisting them?
So because the project is partially federally funded, we are obligated to provide relocation benefits, and those are provided within the framework of what's called the Uniform Act. It's actually the Uniform Acquisition and Relocation Act, and so it has a lot of procedures for who's eligible for relocation benefits. One of the benefits that people are eligible for, if they're displaced by the project, we not only are obligated to purchase what they own, so buy their house based on market value, but then we're also obligated to provide them an allowance for replacement housing. And so, for example, their house might be worth, let's just say, $300,000. But in order to put those people who are displaced in a comparable home, we do an analysis of what's available on the market today. And if the comparable properties on the market are valued at, let's say, $350,000, those property owners are eligible for that $50,000 additional money as a reimbursement. And so that's kind of in a summary, some of the relocation benefits that they're provided. In terms of finding replacement sites for them or assisting with finding replacement land, our role is fairly limited in that. That's really kind of a responsibility of the person who is displaced, but recognizing that we have some excess land that we've acquired from property owners who wanted to sell more than we needed. We've been helping facilitate some of those conversations where if, for example, the property owner is displaced and they identify, or they're looking for a replacement site, we might point out to them, well, here's an inventory of some lands that, the project owns. Would any of these be a potential site that might work for you? And obviously we wouldn't give it to them for free. There's a value discussion there about, exchanging land and that sort of things. So hopefully that helps answer your question.
Yeah, but they're fully aware that they could just move to the lake if they wanted to, or Arizona.
Absolutely.
Or
Yep, absolutely. And everybody's situation is different. We have had people move to the lakes. We have had people move to South Dakota. We have had people move into town. We've had other people buy a rural area and rebuild a new home. So kind of, everything's on the table.
Great, thanks. Does anybody else have any questions on any of these things that Eric has discussed? Eric, do you have anything else to add?
I mean, I could probably go on and on and on, but no, I don't think so. Happy to help answer.
Okay, Jody, do you have anything else you'd like to add? Any of the other committee members have anything that they'd like to share today? Because finance doesn't meet for 29 more minutes.
If you can finish it quickly, I do think you get a prize.
Well, I'm glad we didn't all have to drive in today for this meeting. It's great to be able to do these virtually, especially when they're this short. So thanks everyone for being here. I would take a motion to adjourn. And is there a second?
Representative, we can see their chats.
Okay, we're adjourned.
Thanks
Thanks
you.
everyone.
Yep.